This program contains true stories of rescues. All of the 911 calls you will hear are real. Whenever possible, the actual people involved have helped us reconstruct the events as they happened.
When a life is threatened, every heartbeat and each passing moment becomes more and more precious. I'm William Shatner. Tonight, true stories of compassion and determination on Rescue 911. We begin on a cold day in March of 1988 as members of the Cache County Water Rescue Team were making their way out onto a frozen lake in a remote area outside Logan, Utah.
We had been diving earlier in the winter. We're kind of working on an ice diving certification. And it was kind of a nice day, so we figured we'd head over to Bear Lake and try to get a dive in.
Let's try here. This looks pretty good. Let's clear out some of the snow.
The ice was about 18 inches thick, and so we had to take a chainsaw.
Joe Yonk, a certified instructor, was teaching the others to ice dive, including Lynn Nelson, who'd never dived under ice before.
I was fairly new at diving. I'd put in a little over 50 dives that year. I didn't think it'd be anything too unusual.
We have had some people die ice diving. In fact, they were 2 scuba instructors, and they got caught under the ice and panicked and drowned. When you dive in 36-degree water, which is what the water was over at Bear Lake that day, it slows everything down so that your reactions aren't as fast. You don't think as fast and as clear in what you normally would. You can only stay under for about 10 to 15 minutes without hypothermia setting in.
Okay, let's go get our stuff.
We secured a rope to a buoy that was frozen in the water right next to the hole.
Who's going in first?
Since Lynn had never been under, we decided to let him go first with Joe. And so we tied the safety line to Lynn. Joe had decided he wasn't going to be hooked up. He had said that he would stick close to Lynn. I mean, we have all the confidence in the world in Joe.
Joe's wife, Kayleen, and the others stayed on the surface as safety divers.
The visibility down there was about 5 or 6 feet in front of us. The agreement when we jumped into the water was that I would have the rope tied to me and Joe would swim right next to me, and we'd be within arm's reach of each other at all times.
If they had any problems whatsoever, you're supposed to pull 3 times. And at that point, we will start pulling that line back in.
They're about 50 feet out now.
We were about 150 feet, I would guess, away from the hole. You could see the rope go back and disappear, but you couldn't tell that there was a hole there. The next thing I saw was Joe right in front of me, and his eyes were just bulged out. He grabbed the regulator out of my mouth. What made matters worse at that point was, for some reason, our buoyancy changed between the two of us, and I don't remember who went which direction, but we separated one above the other. And I thought, you know, we're in, this is not going to work. I need air. I needed a breath, and now he's got my regulator, and I remember grabbing him and pulling us back together so we were face to face again. And we started buddy breathing back and forth. At that point, my thought was, where's the hole? So I picked up the rope and started pulling it in to pull it tight.
When the line started pulling taut, I thought maybe it was wrapped around an obstacle or something. It just felt different. It didn't feel right, but it wasn't the 3 quick pulls.
Once the rope got tight, Joe got my octopus, which is a spare regulator, and started breathing on that. I remember pulling the rope in because I thought, we pull it tight, I can pull hand over hand on the rope plus swim, and we'll be able to go straight to the hole. I look over at Joe, and he don't have a regulator in his mouth, and he's going to hold his breath till we get there, and it's a long ways. I knew Joe was in trouble, and I knew if I didn't make it back to that hole, that we were going to die.
When we continue.
I was swimming really hard at that point, and my legs were hurting. I didn't know at that time I was dragging him through the water.
When Joe Young's main regulator and backup both stopped working while ice diving, he became trapped without oxygen below an 18-inch thick layer of ice. To get help, his friend and diving partner, Lynn Nelson, was trying to make his way back to the hole they'd cut in the ice, but it was more than 100 feet away.
I was swimming really hard at that point, and I didn't know why it was so hard. I was pulling hand over hand, and my legs were hurting. I didn't know at that time I was dragging him through the water.
I had the end of the line, and we were getting ready to tie another line to it. Next thing we know, I mean, a big old air bubble just popped right through the hole in the ice. Lynn popped up, and we thought he was in trouble.
Joe! Joe!
A few seconds later, Joe just kind of bobbed to the surface.
His eyes were wide open, and his pupils were fixed and dilated. He wasn't there. I just thought to myself, I thought, oh my God, he's dead. I've recovered enough dead bodies. I know what a dead body looks like, and he was dead.
She just turned to me and said, Dan, go up, get your radio, try to get help.
I took charge. I took care of my husband. It's the first time I've ever done CPR on anybody. You know, I have to certify every year for my job, but when you do it in real life, and I just wanted to get him breathing, and I didn't tilt his head back, and I didn't plug his nose, and I wasn't getting any air into his lungs. I was getting frustrated and mad, and he had a black hood on, and I just grabbed a hold of it, and I yanked it off as hard as I could. Everybody thinks that I just ripped it off so violently that it tilted his head back and opened his airway. I could see that I was getting air into his chest. And that's when he acted like he was going to throw up in my mouth.
Gayleen gave him a few more breaths, and then he started coming a little more around. Then he just laid there and started moaning and stuff.
He started making this awful noise, like somebody had hit him in the stomach and he'd lost his breath.
Are you okay?
We were still going, Joe, are you okay? He just laid there on the ice and made this noise.
Come on, guys, we need to get into the hospital. Get his fins off.
Yeah.
About that time, I said, come on, guys, we've got to take him to the hospital.
After his near drowning, Joe Yonk was taken to the nearest hospital for examination. Doctors treated him for fluid in the lungs, which can be fatal. But after 3 days, he was released without any permanent damage. Three years later, the memories of what happened below the ice are still vivid for Joe.
I knew I could not swim back to the hole. I took those 2 breaths of air and they did absolutely nothing for me. I was still out of air. And the thought that came through my mind at the time was, if we try to buddy breathe, I knew that instead of just one not making it, both of us wouldn't make it. So at that point, I thought, I'll tie the rope around my arm and they can drag me back in later. And at that point, that's the last I remember.
Joe later learned that all 4 of their regulators and backups had failed. The compressed air inside their tanks contained so much moisture that under the extreme cold, the regulators froze. Had they been using another type of regulator, specially designed for ice diving, it might never have happened.
You need to remember to check your equipment very carefully when you're ice diving because of the inherent problems. Make sure everything's working properly, that everything is just right, or you don't do the dive.
I really love Joe, and I know how much he means to me, and I know that without him here, life just wouldn't be the same.
We're much closer than we were before. I think that type of a situation naturally brings you a lot closer. I think it makes you appreciate each other a lot more. Makes you feel more of a bond, I think, than what there was before. Right, dear?
Mm-hmm.